Sometimes the most ordinary moments can turn into extraordinary stories of justice. What I'm about to tell you happened just 3 weeks ago at a gas station outside Denver, Colorado, and it's a story that proves karma has a perfect sense of timing. When 3 motorcycle riders decided to intimidate an elderly woman just trying to fill up her car, they had no idea they were about to come face to face with consequences they never saw coming. It was a scorching hot Tuesday afternoon in late August, the kind of day where the asphalt shimmers with heat waves and everyone's patience runs a little thinner than usual. The Speedway gas station on Highway 36 was busier than normal, with travelers heading home from the long weekend and locals just trying to get through their daily routines. Eleanor Thompson, a 72-year-old retired librarian, pulled her modest 2015 Honda Civic up to pump number 4. Eleanor was the kind of woman who still dressed up to go grocery shopping. Today she wore a light purple blouse with small pearl buttons, pressed khaki slacks, and comfortable walking shoes. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and despite the heat, she looked put together and dignified. Eleanor had been driving this same route for 40 years, first to take her children to school, then to work, and now to visit her son's place every Tuesday for their weekly dinner tradition. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to be cautious but wasn't afraid of the world. As she stepped out of her car and began the process of paying at the pump, the rumble of motorcycle engines filled the air. 3 Harley-Davidsons roared into the station, their riders sporting leather vests, bandanas, and the kind of attitude that announced they owned whatever space they entered. The leader of the group was a man called Tank, a fitting nickname for someone who stood 6'4" and weighed at least 280 pounds. His arms were covered in tattoos, his beard was long and unkempt, and his eyes held the kind of meanness that comes from years of intimidating people smaller than himself. Behind him rode Razor, a wiry man with a permanent sneer and a voice like gravel, and Bull, whose nickname came from both his stubborn temperament and his tendency to charge headfirst into trouble. They pulled up to the pumps directly adjacent to Eleanor's car, revving their engines unnecessarily before finally shutting them off. The sudden silence felt almost ominous. Eleanor tried to mind her own business, focusing on the gas pump's digital display, but she couldn't help but notice when Tank started talking loudly, clearly intending for his voice to carry. "Look at this fancy lady," Tank announced to his buddies, gesturing in Eleanor's direction. "Bet she's never had to pump her own gas before. Probably has servants for that kind of thing." Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she continued filling her tank, hoping they would finish their business and move on. Razor laughed, a harsh sound that made nearby customers glance over nervously. "I bet she's one of those entitled old ladies who thinks the world owes her something. Look at that car, probably bought with Daddy's money." Eleanor couldn't help herself. She looked up and made brief eye contact with Tank, which was exactly the wrong thing to do. "Oh, now she's staring at us," Tank said, his voice getting louder and more aggressive. "What's wrong, lady? You got a problem with bikers? Think we don't belong at your fancy gas station?" "I don't have a problem with anyone," Eleanor said quietly, her voice steady despite the nervousness she felt building in her chest. "I'm just trying to get gas and go home." Bull laughed and spit on the ground near Eleanor's car. "Just trying to get gas and go home," he mocked in a high-pitched voice. "Listen to that accent. Bet she's one of those snobby East Coast transplants who moved here and thinks she's better than the locals." Eleanor was actually from Colorado, had lived here her entire life, but she wasn't about to get into an argument with 3 intimidating strangers. She finished filling her tank and moved toward her car door, hoping to escape the situation. That's when Tank stepped directly into her path. "Where are you going, princess? We're just being friendly. Don't you want to chat with the locals?" Tank's smile was mean, and Eleanor could smell beer on his breath despite it being the middle of the afternoon. "Please move," Eleanor said, her voice still calm but with an edge of steel that came from 40 years of dealing with difficult teenagers in the library. "Please move," Razor repeated mockingly. "Oh, she's got manners, boys. Real proper lady." A family with young children at the next pump over quickly finished their transaction and left. An elderly man who had been washing his windshield glanced over nervously but seemed to decide he didn't want to get involved. Eleanor realized she was increasingly alone with these three men who seemed to be enjoying her discomfort. "You know what I think?" Tank said, stepping closer. "I think you're one of those people who calls the cops on bikers just for existing. Probably see us and think we're all criminals, right?" "I don't think anything about you," Eleanor replied, trying to step around him. "I just want to leave." Bull moved to block her other side. "What's the rush? We're just talking. Unless you think you're too good to talk to people like us." Eleanor's heart was starting to race, but she kept her voice level. "I don't think I'm too good for anyone. I just don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" Tank laughed. "Lady, we are trouble. And maybe it's time someone taught you that not everyone in this world is going to treat you like the special little princess you think you are." What the three bikers didn't know was that Eleanor Thompson wasn't just any elderly woman. She was Eleanor Reeves, mother of one of Hollywood's most beloved actors and one of the most genuinely decent human beings in the entertainment industry. More importantly, she had raised a son who would do absolutely anything to protect the people he loved. And at that exact moment, about half a mile down the highway, Keanu Reeves was riding his own motorcycle, a sleek black Ducati, toward this very gas station. Keanu had been visiting his mother for their weekly dinner, a tradition they'd maintained for over 15 years no matter how busy his filming schedule got. He'd left her house about 10 minutes ago to run home and grab a bottle of wine he'd forgotten, and he was taking the scenic route back, enjoying the Colorado sunshine and the freedom of the open road. As he approached the Speedway station, he noticed his mother's car at the pumps and smiled to himself. Eleanor always worried about having enough gas, so she filled up religiously every Tuesday, whether she needed it or not. He was about to wave and continue past when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Three large men on motorcycles had surrounded his mother's car, and from their body language, it was clear this wasn't a friendly conversation. Keanu pulled into the gas station without hesitation, his bike's engine cutting through the afternoon air like a knife. He removed his helmet as he approached, and several things happened at once. First, Tank turned toward the sound of the approaching motorcycle, probably expecting to see another member of their group or maybe just another biker he could intimidate. Instead, he found himself staring at one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. Second, Eleanor's face lit up with relief and pride as she saw her son approaching. And third, Razor and Bull suddenly realized they had made a very, very big mistake. "Hey, Mom," Keanu said calmly as he walked up to the group, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made everyone present immediately pay attention. "Everything okay here?" The transformation in the three bikers was immediate and almost comical. Tank's aggressive posture melted away, Razor's sneer disappeared, and Bull actually took a step backward. "Keanu, sweetie," Eleanor said, her voice now steady with confidence, "these gentlemen were just introducing themselves." Keanu looked at each of the three men in turn, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. When he spoke, his voice was calm, conversational even, but there was something underneath it that made it clear he was not someone to mess with. "Is that right?" he asked. "Well, that's nice of you guys. I hope you were treating my mother with the respect she deserves." Tank cleared his throat, his face flushing red. "Mr. Reeves, we didn't know. I mean, we were just..." "Just what?" Keanu asked, stepping closer to his mother and putting a protective arm around her shoulders. Because from where I'm standing, it looked like 3 grown men were surrounding an elderly woman and making her uncomfortable. Razor found his voice first, though it came out as more of a squeak than his usual gravelly tone. We weren't doing anything wrong, man. We were just talking. Talking, Keanu repeated slowly. And was my mother enjoying this conversation? Bull, who had been silent since Keanu arrived, suddenly burst out, "Dude, we're huge fans. I've seen every one of your movies. John Wick is like the best action series ever made." Keanu's expression didn't change. "That's great. I'm glad you enjoyed them. But right now, I'm not an actor. I'm a son, and I don't appreciate anyone intimidating my mother." Tank, realizing the situation was spiraling beyond his control, tried to take charge. "Look, Mr. Reeves, there's been a misunderstanding. We weren't intimidating anyone. We were just being friendly." Eleanor spoke up, her voice now strong and clear. "Friendly people don't block someone's path to their car. Friendly people don't mock someone's accent or make assumptions about their character." Keanu looked at his mother, then back at the 3 men. "So you were blocking her path?" The silence stretched for several long seconds. Finally, Tank nodded reluctantly. "And you were mocking her?" Another reluctant nod. "And you did this because?" "Because we're idiots," Razor blurted out, earning sharp looks from his companions. "I mean, because we made assumptions and we were wrong and we're really, really sorry." Keanu studied the 3 men for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "You know what? I appreciate the honesty. But here's the thing, my mother is one of the kindest, most generous people you'll ever meet. She spent 40 years working in public libraries, helping kids learn to read, assisting elderly people with computer problems, organizing community events. She volunteers at animal shelters and food banks. She's the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And you 3 decided to intimidate her based on what? The way she looks? The car she drives? Some assumption about who she is or where she comes from?" Tank's voice was barely a whisper. "We messed up." "Yeah, you did. But here's your chance to make it right." Keanu's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it. "I want you to apologize to my mother. Sincerely. And then I want you to think about this moment the next time you're tempted to judge someone or intimidate someone just because you can." Tank stepped forward, and to his credit, he looked Eleanor directly in the eyes. "Ma'am, I am deeply sorry for our behavior. We were completely out of line, and you didn't deserve to be treated that way. We were wrong about everything." Razor and Bull echoed similar sentiments, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. Eleanor, because she was who she was, graciously accepted their apologies. "Thank you," she said simply. "I accept your apologies, and I hope you'll remember this conversation." As the 3 bikers prepared to leave, their swagger replaced by sheepish embarrassment, Tank turned back one more time. "Mr. Reeves, can I ask you something?" Keanu nodded. "How did you get so?" "I don't know, so calm. If someone was messing with my mom, I'd probably lose it." Keanu smiled, the first genuine smile he'd shown since arriving. "My mother taught me that anger doesn't solve problems, it just creates more of them. She taught me that the strongest response to ignorance is education, and the strongest response to aggression is composure." He looked at Eleanor with obvious affection. "Plus, she's tougher than all of us combined. She didn't need me to rescue her, she was handling the situation just fine. I just wanted to make sure you understood who you were messing with. Eleanor laughed. Oh, stop it. Though I will admit, your timing was excellent. As the three bikers rode away, considerably more subdued than when they'd arrived, other customers who had witnessed the encounter began approaching. A few asked for photos with Keanu, but most wanted to talk to Eleanor, telling her how impressed they were with her grace under pressure. You know, said a middle-aged woman who had been watching from the convenience store, I saw the whole thing. The way you kept your cool and your dignity, that was really something. An elderly man who had been washing his windshield earlier came over and apologized for not intervening. I should have stepped in, he said. I was raised better than that. Don't you worry about it, Eleanor told him. Sometimes these situations resolve themselves in ways we don't expect. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor in her Honda, Keanu on his bike, Eleanor rolled down her window. You know, sweetie, she said, I was actually handling that situation just fine. Keanu grinned. I know you were, Mom. But sometimes a little backup doesn't hurt. Plus, Eleanor added with a mischievous smile, it was worth it to see their faces when they realized who you were. I think that Razor fellow might have actually squeaked. They both laughed, and Eleanor drove away, followed by her son on his motorcycle. But the story doesn't end there. 2 hours later, Tank, Razor, and Bull found themselves at a different gas station, replaying the encounter and trying to process what had happened. I can't believe we did that, Razor said, shaking his head. We basically bullied Keanu Reeves' mother. We bullied an innocent old lady, Tank corrected. The fact that she's related to someone famous just makes it worse because now everyone's going to know about it. Bull looked confused. What do you mean, everyone's going to know? Tank pulled out his phone and showed them a video that was already circulating on social media. Someone at the gas station had filmed the entire encounter, and it was spreading fast. The video showed everything, their aggressive behavior toward Eleanor, Keanu's calm but protective response, and their obvious embarrassment when they realized who they were dealing with. The comments were not kind. We look like complete jerks, Razor said, reading over Tank's shoulder. Because we were complete jerks, Tank replied. And now the whole internet knows it. But something interesting happened over the next few days. Instead of just being content to mock the three bikers online, people started sharing their own stories about Eleanor Reeves. It turned out that Keanu's description of his mother wasn't exaggerated, she really was beloved in her community. Former library patrons shared memories of how she had helped them. Volunteers from local charities talked about her tireless work. Neighbors described her kindness and generosity. The picture that emerged was of a woman who had spent her entire life making other people's lives better. And slowly, the conversation online began to shift. Yes, the three bikers had behaved badly, but the real story became about Eleanor herself and the kind of person she was. Tank, Razor, and Bull found themselves not just embarrassed, but genuinely ashamed. They had targeted for harassment a woman who spent her free time helping others. A week later, Tank made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He looked up the library where Eleanor had worked and made a significant donation in her name. Razor and Bull, inspired by his gesture, did the same with the animal shelter and food bank where she volunteered. They also made a video, not an excuse or a justification, but a genuine apology and a plea for people to think before they judge others. We want people to learn from our mistake, Tank said in the video. We saw an elderly woman and made assumptions based on absolutely nothing. We were wrong, and we're sorry. Mrs. Reeves deserved better, and so does everyone else. The video went viral too, but for different reasons. People were impressed by the bikers' willingness to take responsibility and make amends. Keanu, when asked about the incident in a later interview, was characteristically gracious. "My mother always taught me that everyone deserves a second chance," he said. "These guys made a mistake, they owned up to it, and they're trying to do better. That's all any of us can do." Eleanor herself became something of an internet sensation, though she was bewildered by all the attention. "I just acted the way I was raised to act," she told a local news reporter. "You treat people with respect, you don't let bullies intimidate you, and you give people the chance to do better when they mess up." When asked if she had any message for the three bikers, she smiled. "I hope they learned something about not judging people by appearances. And I hope they remember that kindness is always the better choice." The story became a reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to aggression isn't more aggression, it's dignity, composure, and the willingness to stand up for what's right without losing your humanity in the process. And somewhere in Hollywood, Keanu Reeves continued to be grateful for the woman who taught him that being tough and being kind aren't mutually exclusive, sometimes they're the exact same thing. Because in the end, that's what real strength looks like. Not the ability to intimidate others, but the courage to protect them. Not the power to tear people down, but the wisdom to build them up. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who teaches us the most about strength is a 72-year-old librarian who refuses to be intimidated by anyone. Don't forget to like the videos and subscribe to the channel for more short stories.